Hi. Sometimes we find ourselves in a spot where things are pretty much the way we want them to be. Our workday goes well, the new recipe we try turns out to be very tasty, or a friend drops by unexpectedly. But if we're honest, we can always think of ways we'd like things to be better, even when things are going pretty well. Reality does not hand us a perfect place to be, although we'd like that most of the time. And when we find ourselves in a spot where numbers of things are not going the way we'd like, we can find ourselves fighting reality. Now, fighting reality is a very stressful, anxiety-ridden, and often depressing activity. It begins with an idea deep within us that things should be perfect, or at least they should be the way we want them to be. I say deep within us because most of us, if asked, would say that we know things can't be perfect. There's something instinctual in us, I think, that feels that there's something wrong when things don't go the way we think they should. Then we're liable to feel a need to fix the blame on who or what is wrong. We might identify other people as the culprits and blame it on them. Blame it on their ignorance, or their laziness, or their evilness, and that's what's wrong. Or we may blame it on the universe and say that there's something wrong with this world in which we live. Or we may even blame it on God for making a mistake and creating us in the world this way, or that God is playing cruel games with us. Or we may blame it on ourselves for not being perfect. Not only is it depressing and awful to believe that we're doomed to live forever in such a flawed, broken, and frustrating world, we often compound the stress and anxiety by trying to fix it. This can not only be stressful, but sometimes it can be dangerous. One common example of this battle against reality is the guy who refuses to accept the reality that he's getting older and can't do everything he used to do. So he pushes himself to play tennis as if he's still 20 years younger and ends up seriously injuring himself. Another example is a couple who can't accept the reality of their son being gay. The result is they reject him, or they let it affect their acceptance of him in other ways. There's no way to fix reality. And if we battle against it, that's a battle that we're always going to lose. Imperfect reality is a big puzzle piece of our experience of life. And we need to be able to situate that in our minds and hearts in a way that reduces the stress and anxiety, and it doesn't drive us crazy. An alternative to fighting reality is to go with the flow, as they say. Now, I found this following image kind of helpful in describing going with the flow. It's kind of helped me. Now, this image it's like life is kind of like a river, that's constantly flowing. And I'm in the middle of that life. I'm floating in the middle of that river. Now, I can no way to stop the river, which is reality. I can't stop it from flowing. It's always going to flow. But I can try fighting against it by swimming as hard as I can upstream to prevent it from taking me downstream. Now, I can do that for a while. I put all my energy into doing that. But as I'm doing that, as I'm trying to head upstream, I end up running into things floating down the river, like tree limbs and logs and whatever, and other debris that's being swept along by the river. I run into those things, and I get bruised and injured, and it's not fun at all. And eventually, I run out of strength. I run out of energy, and I can't swim anymore. At that point, I'm in danger of drowning. Now, an alternative to battling the river, to doing that, an alternative is to allow the river to carry me, since I really can't stop it. Then I can use all my energy not to swim against the current, but to swim side to side, which enables me to avoid those things floating down the river, the limbs and tree limbs and the logs and stuff. Now, if I do that, I'm going to last much longer, doing that. And I'm going to endure much less bruising and a lot less pain by avoiding those things floating down the river. So what does this look like in real life? What does that look like in real life to not battle reality? Well, I think it has a lot to do with the familiar serenity prayer that we all know. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Very wise saying. First, we have to come to the understanding that it's not our job to make things perfect, even if that were possible. Accepting this fact can relieve us of that impossible burden and the stress that comes with it. Then we have to keep our focus on the present and what we can do now. Much stress and anxiety comes from regrets and blame that we place on our past, or the fear of the future and what that's going to be. Those things cause a lot of stress. The only thing we can do anything about is the present. Then, as the Serenity Prayer says, we need to discern what things we can change and what things we can't. And this includes being honest about our abilities and the tasks we'd like to address, the things we want to get done. Biting off more than we can chew, as my dad always said, is always a recipe for stress and anxiety. Choosing to accomplish something that is possible, first of all, possible, and manageable, is much more pleasant than attempting the impossible, which is a recipe for insanity, as they say. And finally, as with all things, we need to trust that God is at work in this imperfect reality, which has been around long before we and our ideas of how it should be existed. That is what we call trust or faith. And that's ultimately is the antidote to fear, stress, and anxiety.